didn't see it. No.
Welcome to the channel. I am Adam.
And I'm Cory.
And today is a beautiful day to start planting. It's mid-May and there's a lot of prep work to be done. What are we going to be discussing?
Today we're going to be looking at some gardening. We're going to be looking at getting our beds ready. We're going to be looking at some compost today. And we're going to be looking at transplanting our plants out of the greenhouse into the ground.
Awesome. So, let's get started.
I think that last one was pretty good.
Alright, so we have our garden beds prepped. What's the reason for that?
So what we want to think of with these young plants is that I want to treat this like a baby. So we don't want to have a baby, expect that baby to start walking right away. So what we want to give this time to grow. We want to make it as easy as possible to grow. And the most important part of this plant really at this point is going to be the root system. We want to make sure that the roots have the ability to spread out and grow. And if we have soil that's not tilled up, that we have not prepared, that soil is going to be way too compacted, and it's kind of like that roots trying to get through a wall. And what we want to do is we want to break that up, allow that root system to spread out as much as it can. The height and the yield that we're going to get from this plant is really going to be determined on the root system itself. So we really want to make sure that that root system has an easy as much of a path to get through to get its growth started and to continue its growth throughout its maturity.
So, question, if we have compacted soil, are these plants able to breathe through that, or is that one of the main focuses for tilling your ground?
Well, we have the problem with the roots not being able to grow and spread out, but then we also have a problem with basically the plant being able to breathe. Now, most of photosynthesis, the process of that, is going to come through the leaves, but the roots play an essential role in the growth of the plant. So whether it be through watering or through nitrogen absorption. So we want to be able to give this plant the ability to breathe through its roots. So we want to be able to have oxygen being able to get to the plant, and we want to be able to have nitrogen and other nutrients to be able to get to the plant as well. When we have non-aerated soil, water is very difficult to get to the plant, so you're going to have a plant that is lacking in growth. It's going to stunt the growth of the plant. And then if it can't get the nutrients, those vital nutrients like nitrogen, to absorb through those roots, you're going to have a plant that's not really growing that big either. So with the aerated soil, you're going to have a plant that is able to spread out its growth with its roots, but more importantly, be able to get that breathing going with, in the sense of breathing as a plant, with being able to bring in that nitrogen, the other nutrients within the soil, and being able to bring its water supply through those roots.
All right, so the importance of photosynthesis. Let's talk about that, because we started our seedlings in a greenhouse, and the plants that were further in the back, I'm not sure if they got the correct sunlight, so can we explain what's going on here?
Well, let's look at the basics of photosynthesis first. You know, kind of going back to those middle school days where we had our lessons on photosynthesis, and you know, you have the idea of the plant's taking in sunlight, converting that to food, and what the plant is doing here is it's using the sunlight as a form of energy to create sugar, and it uses the sugar for its food. So it's going to take in carbon dioxide, and it's going to take in the water that you are supplying to it. Now, it can't do anything without the sunlight though, so this plant is going to work hard to get to that sunlight if it's not available. So, well, on Earth, where is the sun? The sun's going to be above the plant's head. So that plant is always going to be designed to go upwards to get that sunlight. So if there's no sunlight available, it's just going to keep on trying to go farther up until it reaches that sunlight. If we think about a seedling going into the ground, the first place that seedling goes is up. Mm-hmm. So it's going to continue to go up as, like I said, as it was designed to do, until it reaches that sunlight. So the problem is that if you don't supply it with the right amount of sunlight, this plant's going to keep on rising up, and you get a very, what we call like a leggy plant. So it's going to get skinnier and skinnier. It's going to keep on going up taller and taller. But the problem with that is that now you've got a plant that doesn't have the right supports. You can have a plant that is going to be easily damaged by wind or other natural events. And then you've got a very shallow root system. When we talked about that before, the root system is really going to determine how big your plant's going to get and what type of yields you're going to get out of your plant. So if you've got a very shallow root system, you're not going to have a very good plant. It's going to be an unhealthy plant and very likely to be damaged in the outcome.
So that being said, I think we should show them an example of what that looks like.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
All right. All right, so this is an example of wind hitting these leggy plants with shallow root system, and then our strong, healthy plants that got all the sunlight they needed with good root base. So we'll just say this is 30-mile-an-hour winds. All right, so this is my leggy plant. This is the healthy one. Here we go. All right, so let's explain a little bit about the composting process and why it's important to put into the soil for the growth of our plant.
So when we understand the importance of compost, we're going to look at two things that are happening with compost, and we need to know two cycles that occur on Earth naturally. The first thing is going to be the carbon cycle, and the second is going to be the nitrogen cycle. And with all organic life on Earth is all carbon based, so it's going to be full of this molecule called carbon. And what we're going to do here is we're taking organic material, we're putting it into the compost, and what that's going to do is that's going to naturally break down over time, but that carbon is going to be stored within that organic material. And what we can do is we're going to continue to mix this compost up until we have a nice soil that we can apply to our garden. The benefit of that is it acts like a natural fertilizer for our plants, so it's going to enhance their growth. It's going to lead to healthier plants. The other part that we're going to have here as well is that we have nitrogen stored inside of these compounds as well. So with nitrogen on Earth, the interesting thing about nitrogen is that our atmosphere is actually made of 78% of it is going to be nitrogen. Now, the difference between nitrogen and carbon is that the plants can take the carbon out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis, but they cannot take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere. The nitrogen that's around in the air is actually useless to it. What it needs to do is it needs to go through a process called nitrogen fixation, where that nitrogen will be stored inside of organic compounds. So what we can have here is we've got our compost, we've got our organic material. When we put that composted soil into the ground, it's going to add nitrogen into the soil. All right, so what would we want to put into our compost? What we're thinking of here is organic material. And what do we mean by organic material? We're talking about table scraps, your fruits, your vegetables. You finish off your dinner, rather than throwing it out into the garbage, you want to put this into your compost. One thing you don't want to put in there is any meat or animal product. You want to basically be looking at plant material. What you can also look at is dead plants, dead organic material like grass clippings, some brush, things that are around the garden that you want to get out of that garden. You can put it into the compost, and it's going to add that nitrogen and carbon into the soil. What you want to look at as far as your water is you do not want to have this sopping wet. You don't want to have it sitting in a pool of water. You're mainly looking at like a light misting for your compost. Trying to make like a spongy-like material with your compost. Do not oversaturate the soil.
So we have our beds prepped. We have our soil nice and light. We have compost to give nutrients to the root system. So the final step is finally planting your bed. So you just want to always think about your spacing. Just go with what's recommended for your plant. You don't want overcrowding, because then they're going to fight for the nutrients in the ground, and you don't want anyone starving. So you just want to go with the recommended spacing and then start your planting. So right here we just have a bell pepper plant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up these roots so they have more motivation to stretch out into the soil. And then I'm going to go ahead and dig around the soil to get it extra loose. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper so I can add some finished compost into it. That'll give a good kickstart to the nutrients it needs of what's not in the soil already. So I got the finished compost here from the previous year of doing our compost mixture. I'm going to just put it directly in the hole and then plant our young plant directly onto that compost, and then slowly work the soil into it. And I'm just going to lightly press into it just so the stem system has some stability before we water it in.
Oh, didn't see you there. Hope you enjoyed our show today. Took a look at gardening, took a little bit of time on compost, looked at planting our plants, making sure we're spacing them apart the right way. I hope you enjoyed our show. It's our first time on this channel, and we got plenty of more steps and guidance for you in your life.
Hold on. I just missed the outro.
You did.
Oh, jeez.
I had to do it all by myself.
Man, oh, darn it. Well,
there's always next time.
We appreciate you guys watching. Please stay tuned for the next video. Hope you guys had fun watching, so stay tuned. Thanks.
See you later.